Dear Heavenly Father, dear God, we just want to thank you, Lord, for giving us another opportunity to serve you. Uh, Lord, we just ask for your Holy Spirit to give us the strength necessary to present this information in a way that can be understood easily and that we can internalize it to prepare us for what's ahead of us. We ask, Lord, for your help to accomplish this. Please be with those who will be hearing this presentation, that it may move upon their hearts to promote change and help to us see clearly what's right ahead of us, Lord. We ask for your holy angels to be amongst us and to help us as we comprehend and understand to move forward according to your good will. Please be with those who could not join this morning. Bless them also and keep them safe as well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath.
Good morning, Victor. Happy Sabbath.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Victor.
Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Happy that everyone's here today. And my presentation will be one done by Brody Lambert, and the name of this study is Pyhrrus equals Putin, and this was done on May 8th, 2023. So first we're going to start by reading this introduction, and we will go slowly through a step-by-step process to see how Putin fits the narrative for today and how he is can be understood by application that he is the last president of Russia. And is does everyone see this? Is the screen going fine?
Yeah, it works.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the midnight crime message. This study can also be understood or referred to as the midnight crime message because it's derived from Acts 27. So first, we want to just ask a few simple questions and see if we could all remember how the history of Pyhrrus, how we found out about the history of Pyhrrus. And first, let's trace back this history and see how we got here. Okay, so when I last presented for you, we looked at the very revolutions, and it was in the context of understanding what a symbolic death looks like today. And as we focus on the King of the South today, and the reason we are discussing this symbolic death is because in 2021, Beneventum represents a Russian loss. And so we are looking for what we should see of Putin and Russia in February of 2022 and prior to the invasion. So in February, we're looking ahead to the eventual invasion of Ukraine, and we can see it coming. We know that the prior year, 2021, we are expecting this defeat of Russia. We were considering discussing what that looks like, and reference was made to other symbolic deaths in prophecy. So today, or back then at that time, was 527 day of the Ukraine war. The Guardian reminds us. And Navalny has been given another 19 years in prison at that time. So Putin's chief political rival now has a combined 3 decades prison sentence, and we're left considering this quite intriguing, fearful, powerful man that Putin is. And I thought today we will trace back over the way that we approach him through prophecy. So this is a review of the very basics of the Midnight Cry. Many of you will remember and be quite familiar, but it helps me a great deal to go back through the process. And for the members of Fiji, you'll also be familiar because a few weeks ago, we went through this presentation. So we have a story of 2 kings. We have Pyhrrus and we have Putin. So how did we come to this conclusion that Pyhrrus equals Putin? Where did we find this information? What did that we did that by working backwards. So how did we get here? How did we come to understand the history of Pyhrrus? Does anyone remember?
Yeah, you're asking us, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, well, she's asking this, but I'm asking it in her behalf, or as I'm reading.
They can turn their mics on if they want to talk.
So the first question here is, how did we come to understand this story of the king of the north and the king of the south? Where is this derived from? Where in the Bible did we point to find this story? How did it lead us here? Does anyone remember? Okay, I'll go to the next.
I think somebody was going to talk.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure where you want us to start, but I remember Elder Tess looking at Acts 27, the number 273.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly it. So the next slide, you see, Midnight Cry message derived from Acts 27. So that right there is exactly the right answer. Okay, so we were led here through or from Acts 27 and the 273, the 273 men. So that took us back to 273 BC. And what took place in year 273 BC? Why was that year so significant? So here we see she's going to give that answer. That year was the conclusion or the result of a war between the king of the north and the king of the south in that story. Okay. So we had Rome in the north versus Pyhrrus in the south. Again, that age-old battle, and we know that foundational to our movement's teaching. So there she is emphasizing that this is foundational to the teachings of our movement. Okay, so Acts 27, pointed us back to 273 BC. And once we started looking closer at that year, we understood that that year was basically a transition point between the king of the north and the king of the south. Okay. So now we want to bring that into our history. So here she says that age old battle, and we know that foundational to our movements, teaching it in this battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, and the understanding that the king of the north is the United States and the king of the south is the Soviet Union, or now Russia. And if we look at the king of the north as moving across the years or looking backwards, we know that it was Greece that made into was made into Persia, and before that Babylon. And we've spent so much time focusing on this massive events, this transition period, which we know is such a long transition. So we go back here to 290, 297, Cassandra dies. So in 301 BC, the empire finally breaks up into the 4 divisions of Daniel, and what Daniel told us to expect. So in 301 BC, we have the north and the south, the east and the west, and that lasts until 297 when Cassandra dies. So we have 4 years of Daniel's prophesied division of the Greek Empire, but this transition continues, and it's 273 BC, which I'm just for simplicity today going to put our transition point here, that we see the diplomatic relation between Rome and Egypt. Egypt to be the king of the south in the transition, king of the south of Bible prophecy, situated south of the glorious land. Okay, so here again we have a illustration of the midnight cry message, which is derived from Acts 27. And once we looked at Acts 27, the 273 brought us back to 273 BC, which we saw the king of the north and the king of the south in that famous battle. And it was Rome versus Pyhrrus. So when we bring that down to our history, we understand that as being Russia versus the United States. So when we are taken to 273 BC, we see that this maximum flood descends on Egypt by the king of the north. It places us at a point in time in prophecy, and when we understand that this is the result of a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, in its own story, in its own parable, we see that the king of the south was Pyhrrus in that story. So just to remind ourselves of the geography of this particular story. So Pyhrrus is the king of Pyhrrus over here, and Tarentum has appealed to him for help from the north. Fighting room in the north, Pyhrrus is down here in the south, and this is the battle between the north and the south that this parable is referencing. So remember that this is still a period of transition. So in our typical approach of Bible prophecy, when we simplified as Egypt in the south being south of the glorious land, and Rome in the north controlling Syria, Rome is still arising. In this complicated play of events, even though Rome doesn't yet have control of the geographical territory of Syria, it is rising, and we see this parable in this context. In the complicated transition period, so when we focus on this particular parable, this war between the king of the north and the king of the south, because this originally was worked backwards. We saw it first in Pyhrrus period in Italy. But that was really the second period of his life. So this is the second and first period. But we see these two phases of Pyhrrus in Macedonia, Italy, and both which have relevance to our understanding of the king of the south. So Pyhrrus himself we recognize as a great general, is considered by antiquity. So again, she is basically outlining that history and all the transition points in that history to help us portray or outline that history so we can make application of it as we move forward. Okay, so we're going to skip forward just one slide. She goes over and explains again that same outline in just a different, slightly different fashion. But what we want to really do now is look at the name of Pyhrrus and how his name, when applied correctly, and the characteristics of his name can really help us see how that fits in our understanding of Russia today. So here I have a few slides as we go forward, which explains his name and helps us apply that in our time. In the time before Christ, he was considered second only to Alexander the Great, which we know is incredible. He speaks incredibly high of his strategic skill and capability in the battlefield. So I don't know if all of you may have heard of Plutarch, but Plutarch was a historian in the century after Christ, and he wrote that Hannibal through Pyrrhus to be the greatest general of all time, second only to Alexander the Great. And Hannibal today is more well known than Pyrrhus. Hannibal spent decades fighting the Romans. He was a Carthaginian general. I don't know if you learned in school like I did about how he crossed the Alps with the elephants. He had an amazing victory, but he did eventually lose to Rome. And he praises Pyhrrus as the great general, and glowing praise is quite meaningful. So who remembers what his name means? If we were to go into the etymology of Pyhrrus, who can remember this? This is an easy question for those of us that have grown up speaking English, because Pyhrrus rhymes with pyrotechnics. Okay, so here she is getting into the definition or the root words of his name. So if we take his name and run it into a Google search, we will arrive or stumble across this um article here from Wikipedia, which describes Pyhrrus really well. And here in the middle of the, or at the bottom of this graph, you see the etymology of his name. Okay, so that's what we want to focus on right now, is his name and how that can be applied in application through our methodology to really bring out some characteristics that will help us align these two histories together, and it will enable us to see a clearer picture of the events ahead of us. So I'm going to take you to the Wikipedia page dedicated to Pyhrrus. On the Wikipedia page, and of course, it tells us a whole range of information, as Wikipedia often is used for. And it fills us on the background and early life and the battles and eventually his death. But here is the section on the etymology, and it says that Pyhrrus has been Latinized and is derived from the Greek name meaning flame-like or flammable. Is derived from the word fire, so that's where we get pyrotechnics from, which means fire. Okay, so here, that is one key characteristic here of Pyhrrus. So keep that in your mind as we move forward. So Pyhrrus is derived from flame-like or flammable. Okay. Let's see here. So Wikipedia, we have these little, okay. So here she goes on and explains so where the information from Pyhrrus came from Wikipedia, and she traces this back to just some professor from a university. You can do that if you like. If you go to Wikipedia, you can press this small word down here, and it'll take you to that. And she's just going over a technique to where you could trace back the information to help us get familiar with how to trace back information to where it came from. So if you want to do that, you can, but what we want to focus on here is his name and what it's derived from. So Pyhrrus, let me go forward here to his. Okay. So here again we see Pyhrrus etymology. So notice here, as his name is further broken down into these specific, it says it's derived from, it was Latinized. So let's see here. In one part of the book, Pyhrrus is associated with the destructive power of fire, both through imagery and the etymology of the name Pyhrrus, flame-colored, red-headed. So let me blow this up here. You can see a bigger picture of the article from Wikipedia. So notice here at the bottom it says fiery red colored, And if you click on this information, it'll go over a wealth of information, how his name in history is derived from, or it was used throughout history to denote fire and in battle, and red. And this is very important because these same characteristics are still used today. Okay, when we bring that down to our history, we will see here in just a second how the same characteristics are used not only in politics today, but also in culture. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. Okay, let's see here. So in one okay, so notice here in the middle of the paragraph, so Pyhrrus etymology of the name Pyre is flame colored or red headed. Okay, so we see this symbol of fire and red in Pyhrrus name, and we know that when we are making application of that, it takes us to revolution, and we were going to share screen. Okay, the red flag is predominantly a symbol, and this is a symbol of socialism, communism, Marxism, and left-wing politics and anarchism. The originally empty or plain red flag has been associated with left-wing politics since the French Revolution. Socialists adopted the symbol during the Revolution of 1848, and it was first used as the flag of the new authority by the Paris Commune of 1871. So let's go back and see if we could trace back the characteristics. So we went from his name, Pyhrrus, and we broke down his name through the help of Wikipedia and the etymology, which is this way of tracing back in history how his name was used and understood. So his name was used in battle to or in politics, or in battle also to denote revolution. Okay, so if you go through this previous Wikipedia page here, it'll eventually lead you to red in politics. So the transition point was made by the characteristics, and once you start clicking around, it'll eventually lead you to this here, the red flag in politics. So his name is red or fiery, and then also red was used as a symbol of revolution, not only in his history, but notice now how the red flag, which is derived from Pyhrrus, is also used in revolutions in our history. So next, what we're going to try to show is how Pyhrrus, notice here, fiery red or red colored, okay, led us to red in politics. And notice what this says. In politics, a red flag is predominantly a symbol of left-wing politics, including socialism, communism, Marxism, labor movement, and anarchism. The originally empty or plain red flag has been associated with left-wing politics since the French Revolution. Okay, so what we want to derive from here, or what we want to categorize is, notice here, French Revolution. Okay, it plainly sets that out for us. And then later down in this article, notice how it says Soviet Union and the Russian Revolution. Okay, so socialism adopted the symbol during the Revolution of 1848, and it was first used as the flag of a new authority by the Paris Commune of 1871. Now notice this, the flag of the former Soviet Union introduced after the Russian Revolution is explicitly inspired by the plain red flag. So Pyhrrus, which is the king of the South, is associated with red and the red flag and fire. And then so that same those same characteristics of the red and the red flag is also associated with the French Revolution. So notice the French Revolution also adopted these characteristics of the red and the red flag and revolution. And then the Soviet Union and the revolution of that time period also adopted the same characteristics. So we can see how these things tie together, and is laying out and painting out a picture for us to educate us to see this picture correctly as it relates to our time. So what we want to focus in now is revolution. Okay, so we went from Pyhrrus to red to revolution. Okay, so now we want to go to another article from Wikipedia, which is the red in politics. Okay, also I have a few extra notes here which I didn't put in the these slides. So red may also, you know what, let me see if I can. Okay, so another article that you will run across is red in Russia. So notice how Russia adopted this color of red, and that's easy for us to see because we've probably heard this expression before as the redcoats. Okay, the Red Army, the redcoats, red Russia, or red politics. Okay, and it can all be traced back to Pyhrrus and the red fiery, the red in that time period, which was adopted in war all the way back then. So notice here, you see this red revolution is a transition period. Okay, and we read all these articles from Wikipedia that Brody Lambert, she did the work for us, but we can review and see how she laid out this information. So notice here, 273, Pyhrrus Revolution. Okay, 273. And then in 1798, there was also a French Revolution. So notice the word revolution. And in all of these histories, red in politics was associated with that transition point. Okay, now red in politics is something's that is worth for us to study and to read these articles from Wikipedia that will help us to again see red in politics in our history. So notice here, 1917 Russian Revolution is also associated with the color red. Let me see if I pull that up. Okay, Red Russia. Okay, I'll go back to that previous slide, but notice here, Red Russia or Red Russians, or Red Russian, communism, Bolsheviks. Again, you can click on all this stuff here and it'll bring all these articles that will give us more information on the Red Revolution. Okay, so back to the slide. Notice now in 1989, again, there was a revolution, or the Cold War. Okay, and there are many, I haven't been able to find it on Wikipedia, the exact term of, but there are plenty of other articles. Like there's one that I found. Let me see if I can, well, no, I can't pull it up now, but one from Britannica.com and many other renowned websites and articles which refer to 1989 as a revolution time period. So what we want to emphasize right now is the word revolution in connection with the color red and these transition points, which we traced back from Pyhrrus, Acts 27 with the 273 and all those characteristics that painted this picture for us. And here at the final row, you know, you can, I left that open. It's nothing dogmatic, but 2020, it could be 2020, I don't know, but, or it could be something else, but this is the final revolution. Okay, so here we see all of this red associated with the revolution. So in our period, these same characteristics may very well be present in our history to help us see or outline our transition points in with these characteristics. So now if we go back to red in politics, I kind of skipped around here to build a little bit of context, but now we can go back and I want to emphasize a few more points. Okay, so let's read here a little bit from Brody. In one part of the book near Delimus or Pyhrrus is associated with the destructive power of fire, both through imagery and through allusion to the etymology of the name Pyhrrus. Okay, if we skip down, what we want to emphasize in politics, a red flag is predominantly a symbol. So in politics, a red flag is predominantly a symbol, and this is the symbol of socialism, communism, Marxism, left-wing politics, and anarchism. The originally empty red flag has been associated with left-wing politics since the French Revolution. Okay, it says here French Revolution, but now we understand that we could trace it back even further back, all the way to Pyhrrus. Okay. And the symbol during the revolution of 1848, and it was first used as the flag of a new authority by the Paris Commune of 1871. If there's any questions or comments, or if anyone wants to read, please feel free to interrupt me and make comments or anything.
Thank you, Victor. It's really interesting information. I had not known all that about his name. So really good information. Appreciate that.
Oh, praise God. Thank you for being here. And I'm glad this is making sense. I know it could be a little confusing as I'm trying to relay the information across, but as we read, hopefully it'll begin to make more sense and a better picture can be painted that we can grasp this information.
Actually, you're doing a real good job. It's becoming much clearer. Absolutely. New information too. I'd not known some of this stuff. So you're doing great.
Amen. Okay, so red in politics. So the flag of the former Soviet Union introduced after the Russian Revolution is explicitly inspired by the plain red flag, which is also used as a symbol by some democratic socialists and social democrats. For example, the League of the Social Democrats of Hong Kong, the French Socialist Party, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, the Labour Party of Britain until the late 1980s, but then they changed it. And notice here, it was inspired for the socialist anthem, the red flag, prior to the French Revolution. And also, I know China has a red flag too. And I know there are a lot of flags, as I was doing this study, a lot of flags have red in them. But what we want to take note of or look after is a solid red. I mean, like the entire flag is red. And when you see this whole solid red flag, then that is not necessarily just, like a red stripe, not that, but an entire red flag has a different meaning, which symbolizes, anarchy, communism, rebellion, revolution, anarchy, and all of those, bad characteristics of the flag, if you want to put it that way. So as we move forward here, we see Pyhrrus. You see here on the left, I put down all the Wikipedia articles to kind of help the picture as it comes along. So Pyhrrus, we went from Acts 27 to Pyhrrus, and then Pyhrrus we went to the red flag because that's derived from his name, and then red flag in politics and red Russia. Okay, and I never knew this when I stumbled across it last night, but it just clicked for me when red Russia, this article here, if you click on it on your own time and start clicking on all of these characteristics, it'll shed a lot of information why they adopted the red color at this solid red color, and that is a symbol of anarchy, communism, fire, battle, and revolution. So as we move forward, now what we want to do is start to, as we close this off, we want to focus in on Putin and how we can symbolize or line up Putin as the last president of Russia. So I'm going to move forward. Just before I read this, I want to move forward just one slide so we can see this this line here. So for the next 5 or 6 slides, all it's going to be is we're going to read from Brody and what she laid out for us, and we're going to be looking at these lines over and over again because that's the conclusion of the presentation. So we're going to align Putin with that history, with Pyhrrus. But before we do so, we want to remember the verse in the Bible that was used, or how she puts it, that gave us license or authority to use Putin as the king of Russia. Or you could say Putin is Russia and Russia is Putin. And as we go forward, you'll know, you'll understand exactly what she meant by that. So, can somebody tell me the Bible verse that we were using when we were talking about a kingdom like Russia? What is the Bible verse that we go to that gives us license to also identify Putin as a king? So here we see Daniel 2:37 and 38. So does anyone want to read these two verses by any chance here on the side of the screen?
I will. So 237, thou, O king, art a king of kings. The God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength and glory. And 238, and wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold.
Thank you. So here, these two verses can be used to identify Putin not only as Russia, but Russia as Putin. Okay, and that's important to keep in mind as we go forward, because just because of this little point here, it'll make so much more sense as we move forward, because I never understood the weight of how important this little point here as I was doing this study. So notice here, Daniel is explaining the different metals and the head of gold we know as Babylon, but Daniel also identifies Nebuchadnezzar as the head of gold, and we know that gives us license to identify a king as the kingdom. And if Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold and Babylon is the head of gold, then Nebuchadnezzar is Babylon. So when we are speaking of Russia, now we're going to transition to speaking about Putin as Russia. He is the king of Russia today. So let's just start with the history of Pyhrrus. But so in other words, what she's saying is we can interchange these two terms. We can call Putin Russia or call Russia Putin. You can interchange these terms as you see fit on what you're trying to bring out or what you're trying to paint. So, let's just have a look at the few kings before Pyhrrus. So there was a series of people got sick of him fighting the Second Diadochi War, and he was removed in a coup by Neoptolemus II came to power. He was from a rival family, but eventually Acides was restored to the throne. So there was a coup, and Automeles came to power as a rival, a political rival, but then the people again returned to the throne to Acides. However, he weakened by this coup and he lost power. Okay, that it might have found it a little confusing, but we can derive a lot of information from here. First off, what stands out for me here is notice how it says here in the history of Pyhrrus. Okay, notice here. The people got sick of him. Okay, that's really what stood out for me. And he was weakened by this. Notice he was restored back, but he was weakened by this, and the people put him back to the throne. So there was a coup. And the people again returned the throne to Acides. However, he was weakened by this coup. And the people fought against him. Okay. The reason that was important to me was because not a lot in history, not a lot of in fact, I don't know any entity or any nation that has been able to overthrow or take over Russia. Okay, I know that Napoleon tried to, even Hitler tried to take over Russia, and many others throughout history, but they never succeeded because Russia is just so vast, so enormous, and so the population. Okay, it's very hard to overthrow Russia, but if the people can overthrow Russia from within and cause a revolution from within, then maybe that's a way, or that's a characteristic of how, I'll put this on silent. And that's a characteristic of how Russia will fall from within. And there in history, we know there's a time in history where that took place, actually probably several. In 1917, it was the people from within that produced a revolution. And there we see, this domino effect of how Russia fell from within. Because any external power that tries to take over Russia may not succeed. And again, we see the same thing taking place in 1989, where the revolution of that time period, it was the people from within that really were able to overthrow or make any kind of changes in Russia, when all of these other external powers, it was very difficult for them to achieve these plans. So that's what took. That characteristic there is what stood out for me. The people got sick of him, and the people removed him. He was removed by the people. Okay. But the point of this slide here was to identify Putin as a king, and be able to interchange these terms, meaning refer to Russia as Putin or refer to Putin as Russia. Okay. So here we see these two lines, and these lines may look a little confusing at first, but the way to understand them is, of course, through context. These two lines are two different modes or illustrations that I've seen used by Elder Tess and also Brody, who did this this study. So in this first line, you align Ascites and Gorbachev in the beginning here, and the starting point here was the coup. Now, I didn't put coup under Gorbachev. It should belong there, but if you look at this first graph here, we'll look at the second one in just a bit, but notice here what she says. Let's drop down to what we want to look at is, one second. Oh, you know what? It's on the previous slide. Okay. Near the bottom of the paragraph, it says here, let's look at a few kings before Pyhrrus. So there was Ascites. Okay. The characteristic that we also want to look at is the coup. Okay, the coup is very important because that is the characteristics that we align. Notice here, Ascites, you see the characteristic of a coup, and then Gorbachev also was taken out by a coup, or at least they attempted to. So let's see here. Okay, so Ascites in the middle of the paragraph, Ascites came and changes, forces him to change, and okay, his brother came in and kills Ascites. We have Alcites on the throne. This was a bit disastrous. The people could only take so much from Ascites, and he was deposed and takes the throne by his protector Pyhrrus. He was just 11 years old in this time, and so he wasn't ruling himself. His guardians were ruling for him. There are some differences in the dates that are reported for when he became king because of that, but this generally accepted he was 17 years when he became king. Okay, so I think she's switching gears now. Notice how on this next line here, she says, if we trace back, this is the beginning of the paragraph, second sentence into the paragraph, it says here, if we trace back the number of leaders in Russia, we had Gorbachev as the final leader of the Soviet Union. Now, Gorbachev is removed in a coup by the Gang of Eight. It doesn't last very long, but Yanev, the leader, issues a decree shortly into the coup that makes him the acting president of Russia. So we have Gorbachev. He's removed for a short while. Yanev declares himself the acting president of Russia. The coup is brought under control, but Gorbachev returns, but he is weakened. So just like Ascites, he came back, but Gorbachev is weakened, and he blows political pressure from the West, and no longer sees Gorbachev as the best influence for Russia. So again, we see Ascites taken out in a coup, and then Gorbachev also, he was removed by the Gang of Eight, and in that time period, if you research that on your own, you will find the history of these eight persons, this gang of 8 who attempted to remove Gorbachev, and they didn't necessarily remove him. He came back on the power of the throne, but he was weakened. And I think that's an important characteristic there, because not only was there a coup, but after the coup, they both come back to the throne. Ascites, right, thousands of years ago, comes back on the throne, just as Gorbachev comes back on the throne. But when they do, they're both weakened. So that characteristic is like two characteristics into one. So the coup attempted to remove them. It didn't succeed. They came back to power, but they were weakened. So those characteristics there line up these two lines, these two stories very, very well. That enables us to really put these leaders of Russia all the way to the end. So the coup is the beginning line, the beginning transition, or the beginning characteristic that sets this line forward. Okay. And the second line here is a little bit different. This one looks at the very first leader of Russia, and the very first leader of that time period of the Diadochi Wars. Okay, Admetus was the first leader, and then Stalin was the first leader, and then you count 10. So there you have two characteristics. On that very first waymark, you have two characteristics that enable us to line up these histories very well. Okay, 10 and the first. So the first king followed by the number 10. Those two characteristics line up these two lines here. Okay. Now, real quick, what is the time frame? How long am I going up until? I don't want to
You have time. You can go, I mean, sometimes we go till 10:30. We're not starting our second service until 11.
Oh, okay.
So you're good.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Good review too, because a lot of this stuff, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's forgotten a lot about this history that takes us from Pyhrrus to Putin.
Praise God. I'm happy to hear that. Okay. So, okay. So back to the coup. Okay. So he was removed for a short while. He comes back, but he was weakened. And they would like to okay. Now notice here, we left off by the influence of Russia. This was like the third or fourth sentence in the paragraphs. They would like to particularly support Boris Yeltsin so that the Soviet Union is dismantled, power is handed over to Boris Yeltsin in 1991. So we've got Yeltsin, and we align Yeltsin up with Ascites the second. Knowing I'll see this second has a ungovernable temper that made him despised by the people and Boris Yeltsin. Okay, so this next characteristic here again stands out. I think there's two characteristics in one. The first one is, again, we see the people of this nation. And we all always want to take note of the people inside Russia, because when the people inside Russia stop liking the leaders, then that's a sign. Whenever I see revolution in Russia, I know protests now, they really, I mean, you can't really even protest in Russia anymore. I've watched some documentaries that if they see any protest, they'll shut it down very fast. They don't even allow that. But that doesn't mean it'll never happen again, because the people are fed up, and when they burst, when they reach a limit, the people of Russia will revolt again. So anyways, back to this characteristic here. The characteristic of Yeltsin is that the people, notice here, despised him because his ungovernable temper, and the second one was he was a heavy alcoholic. And many of you probably heard about the incident that took place in the United States when in 91 Boris Yeltsin came here and he managed to escape the White House hotel or wherever he was staying at that time, and he went and got drunk on he was found on the streets almost naked. He was just in his underwear, and he was flagging down a taxi, and he wanted to go buy some pizza. So that's a famous story that you could read about.
I remember hearing about that, but I just can't imagine it.
Yes, I know.
It's unimaginable.
Exactly. And you know how prideful or nationalistic the Russians are. So when a leader
Oh,
which represents them, are supposed to represent them, um when he manifests himself like that, the people are going to despise him.
right. It's so utterly embarrassing. And Susan just wrote it was covered up by diplomatic immunity, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So now so keep those two characteristics in mind. Yeltsin was despised by the people. He was a drunken, and then notice here, Ascites the second was also despised by his people because his ungovernable temper, and no one can control him, neither himself or neither his people. So again, those characteristics line up very nicely with these two leaders here, right? Ascites the second, and then Yeltsin. So as these leaders transition one after another, they line up very nicely. The same characteristics are, perfect with one, even though they're thousands of years apart. The Lord made sure that the characteristics of these people are the same characteristics to one another, if that makes sense. Their character flaws, or if that's the way to say it, were the same, right? They both were despised because they were ungovernable. So that enables us to line these histories together and these leaders. And as we approach Putin and Pyhrrus, notice how Pyhrrus was the last, right? So that means Putin is the last. If these leaders are ascending one after another with the same characteristics following each other, then that means Putin is the last president of Russia. So I don't know how old Putin is now. What is he, like in the 60s, 70s? I forgot. I can look it up. Not that that has anything to do with anything, but his he's aging. I know that I read this article. I know this is off topic, but where Trump may very well be the oldest president in history if he ends up getting reelected, and we know he will. Let's see here. So, anyways, so as we move forward, now we're going to get into the characteristics of Putin. And the characteristics that we want to emphasize or follow is that as these two kingdoms are coming to an end, as they're transitioning, or as many have called it, a symbolic death, right? Then we want to pay attention to the characteristics of Putin now, which is, notice here in the last paragraph here, it says, his behavior, his drunken behavior, this happened as was an important aspect, and the government was in chaos. So because of all of these things that were taking place, you know, the people didn't like him, and all the other characteristics. Notice here, the people were in chaos. So the people from within Russia were in chaos, and so they had to scramble and elect somebody quickly. And so they elected somebody that was inexperienced, somebody that did not have a long political history behind him, or somebody that was experienced enough. So that's what she is trying to portray here, is that Putin was handed over, power was handed over once. Hey, I'm in a meeting. Oh, can you go ask your brother? So, sorry. So Putin was inexperienced. Okay, he rose up out of nowhere. No one really knew him that well. I mean, he had some roles. Some people knew him, but he was given the presidency in a way that some may say was unconventional, right? He rose up very fast. And so that is an important characteristic that Putin lines up with Pyhrrus. Now notice the next slide. In fact, Pyhrrus was only 17 when he became king. So that characteristic lines up very nicely with the characteristic of Putin, which is also that he too was inexperienced. So as we read here, in 1989, Putin is in East Germany. He is working for the KGB in counterintelligence. He was working there in counterintelligence, and when the Berlin Wall fell, he was there for several weeks. And after it fell, he was there. Unrest and Dresden, he was placed in a scary situation, hiding within the compound of the Secret Security Service where he was working. He was left alone as the riots were occurring outside of his building. He calls the local office for help, and they say, "We can't come to you." Okay, my apology. So he calls the local office for help. They can't come unless Moscow permits, and Moscow is silent at that moment in Putin's life. He tells us about this story in Putin's biography, A Course of Plan. And in 1989, Putin is working for the KGB. And in 1991, the USSR is dismantled, and from 91 through 95, he is working in Leningrad, which is St. Petersburg today. So he comes back to Leningrad between 91 and 95 and works in local politics. So if you think of it, we have the city of Melbourne. Maybe it's the city of Suva if somebody is working from the mayor. So what she's explaining here is that he was working in local politics. His role was not a role that has any significance of management. So she's emphasizing on the point that his line of work or his experience was that of local politics, had nothing to do with politics that governed the nation or anything of significant outcome. So she's emphasizing how he was inexperienced. So again, here she emphasized that in 96 he heads to Moscow. He had 4 years between 96 and 99 where he was in politics, in state politics. So to only work in state politics for 4 years and at the end of the 4 years hand the keys to the country almost makes him the equivalent of the inexperienced Pyhrrus when he became king at 17. And she says here, Putin was a bit older than 17, but the parallels that we want to see is that the experience that these two men had prior to them being handed the keys of the country. Then, as we go to the end of this paragraph, it says here, oh, this is I think a point that we forgot to emphasize. So notice here how Pyhrrus was the chief king of a collection of tribes and was from one of the principal tribes, and he was from one of the principal tribes of Pyhrrus also was if he counts, so the king's number 1, if we count 10 ahead, ops not thinking we can count 10. Okay, so what she's saying here, sorry, the way it was transcribed, I think, had some spelling errors, but in other words, what she's saying here is that he was derived from a king that was made up of a collection of tribes. So if you want to bring that characteristic down and also see that Putin is king from a kingdom that was comprised from a collection of tribes or a collection of Soviet states. So there you have a characteristics that may work for some people when you line them up. And also, if you count 10, okay, so then you see here on the second line here in the corner, you have Stalin. There's not 10 lines in between, unfortunately, but there is supposed to be 10 individual leaders there in both history. Now, I didn't necessarily have those. I don't think Brody outlined that for us. And I didn't take the time to go out to go and find the 10 leaders. We can I think we can do it really quick. Let me see here. I know that there's okay, found. Okay. Okay, so yes, there is 10. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. Okay, so I went on Wikipedia and how do I put screen share? Oh, new share. Okay. New share. and then I click on Firefox. Okay, share. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah, it changed.
So here we see right in the middle, we see the leaders of Soviet Russia from 1917 to 1991 dash present. So here we see, oh, look at that. November 9th, 1917. You see that? Vladimir Lenin. Whoa, can you believe that? Look, it says it right there. Vladimir Lenin, November 9th, 1917.
Wow.
Vladimir Lenin, wow.
I never knew that. That's
Did
oh,
you?
it's,
Probably.
yeah, that's remarkable.
Can't make that up.
Yeah, so okay, so Vladimir Lenin, number one. Okay, Joseph Stalin, two. So let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Putin's the 10th. There it is. And then, of course, Medvedev comes in, but he's taken out, or not taken out, but it's, he's just there for a little while. Oh, and that's, as we go forward, that characteristic right there also works very nicely to line up this history too, because there is a parallel of the same nature in that time period of the Pyrrhic Wars. So when we line them up, that's more evidence that shows Putin as the last president. So there you have 10 leaders of the Soviet Russia all the way to our present day, starting with in November 9th, 1917. Okay, so let me stop share, and then I go back to okay. Okay. So there she was emphasizing the 10, the number 10. And I think what we're doing now is we're transitioning from this first set of lines to the second set of lines. So they both work. One line is lined up by the characteristics that we went over, which is the coup, right? There's a coup. He comes back into power, but he's weakened. And then the people rise up against him. So in both of those histories, those two characteristics is what enables us to put together this first set of lines, which work up very nicely, showing that each leader has the same characteristics back then and today. And then a new set of line is used. And the way we start that is by just counting 10 leaders from the beginning of the revolution, which we learned even began on November 9th, 1917. So the Russian, how would we word that? The Russian Revolution that whole history, that transition point, we could word it like that transition point of the 273 and all that we've learned with the red in politics and how that was used in all of those histories, pointing to this transition point. That transition point began on November 9th, 1917. So we count 10 from November 9, 1917, and then we get all the way down to Putin. So Putin then definitely must be the last leader of Russia. Because notice now, let's get into the co-rule. Now that for me is pretty significant too, how there is a co-rule between these two histories. So let's read. See here, Leningrad, Putin. Okay, so if we count number 10, we count 10, head not thinking we okay. Let's go to the next. Okay, so while he's in Pyhrrus, hey, can you go now first? Ask your brother to do it. I can't.
Don't you do it.
No, I can't right now. Ask your brother to help you. Okay, so while he's in exiles, he goes to a wedding, right? Or was that, I know there, oh, surely. Okay, we'll leave that. Oh, that's part of another characteristic, but while Pyhrrus is in exile, it is during that time that he goes and joins Demetrius, and we have the battles that occurred in Macedonia early in the peace of the battle. Ipsus, for instance, occurs during the time period of Pyhrrus. So he comes back with the armies and queen money from Egypt. Ptolemy gives Pyhrrus the support he needs to take back control. But what happens is, for a period of time, there is a period of co-rulership. And Pyhrrus didn't want to start a civil war, so he just goes back and forms a joint governship, and they rule together. Okay. So here,
Dad.
she was outlining the characteristics of Pyhrrus and how he he didn't want to cause a civil war, so he excuse me for 1 second. Okay, come on. Hey, what kind of cereal do you want? Sorry, I have to do this or he won't leave me alone.
We understand.
It'll just take me 1 second.
No problem.
Okay, sorry about that. So we left off where we were lining up the characteristics of the co-rulership. So that again is another characteristic that enables us to line up these two histories together. So the more characteristics we have, the better the picture looks, the more the picture begins to to hold ground. These characteristics is what really stabilizes these two histories together, and it's important to really know where to put them and see how they fit together. So again, we see this co-rulership. So if we go to the bottom of this paragraph, we see here let's see here. At the bottom it says Medvedev became the prime minister during the tenor, and Medvedev, complying and complaintly, steps aside to end his term, and Putin again took power of the nation. And the same thing took place, as we all know, with Neopod II. Okay. In that history, we could probably even find it on Wikipedia. But yes, yeah, you could find it on Wikipedia also. But Neopod II was the co-ruler of Pyhrrus. And again, here we see this characteristics that we might have overlooked, but it says here that he didn't want a civil war. He didn't want an uprising by the people. So he did this in fear of a civil war or of a revolution. So in both histories, these rulers were afraid of the people and what they may do if they overstep the Constitution or their proceedings. So, as we read earlier, Neopod II where was it? Ruled with Pyhrrus, and I was looking for the place where she said, "Oh, notice here." It was at the very beginning of the paragraph. She says here, "For a period of time, this period of core rulership, Pyhrrus didn't want to start a civil war, so he goes back and forms a joint government or joint governorship to rule together." Okay, so I think that there is a characteristic worth taking note of, is that in the history of Pyhrrus, he didn't want to risk a civil war. He didn't want to risk upsetting the people, because you know what happens if we were to bring that down to our period. We know what happens if the people of Russia becomes unsettled. So again, in the history of Pyhrrus, a co-rulership took place to prevent an uprising or to prevent a revolution or a civil war. And same thing took place in the period of Putin and Medvedev. What was that, around 2008, 2009 time period? Again, Putin didn't want to cause a civil war or a revolution because the Constitution of Russia states that he cannot run more than 2 terms consecutively. So he wanted to avoid a revolution or an uprising by the people. So there you have almost a total of 3 characteristics that were present in the history of Pyhrrus, just on that little point right there of the co-rulership. To prevent civil war was the object or the reason for this co-rulership, which is quite significant. So if they're afraid of the internal revolution, what that can cause to the nation, then they probably know that the only thing that can bring them down, Russia down, or in that time period, the Pyrrhic Wars, was an uprising from within. So he was mindful of that, that potentially happening. Okay. So there we've put together those few characteristics in place as we move forward. Okay, I think another characteristic that's worth identifying here is, let's see here, the beginning and the ending. I forgot what that characteristic was. Let's see here, we can read it. Notice here how she describes another characteristic that really solidifies this line here, and she says the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the ending. So she's paralleling Putin with Stalin. Stalin is the beginning. Oh, I know what they both use power or force to rule, but let's read and see what the difference is of force. They both use it, but remember, Putin comes from a different kind of mode of warfare. Stalin is used more of an iron fist military approach, and more of a like a hard hand, iron fist, that type of thing. Putin, he was his characteristic is more on the line of information. What information do you have that can, sabotage the other side? So his experience was more in information. I believe that was the characters, but let's read here and see how she outlined this. The terms, then we have Putin against the president. Okay, 1 second. The co-rulership. Does anyone remember or have any comments on this characteristic? What is the characteristic of Stalin and Putin that would solidify this application here? How is Putin characterized with Stalin?
I keep having this phrase in my mind and I can't get it straight, where she, not Brody, but when Elder Tess originally did it, that if Pyhrrus is Putin and Stalin is Putin, then Putin is, I don't remember how she said it. Maybe you have it from Brody's recent study. But she was bringing the three of them together. And I may have that wrong.
No, I think you're on the right track.
I just did it wrong.
And
It was an A plus B equals C.
no, that makes sense. It's just I think the beginning, what defined these men we see, they both have origins in poverty.
Right.
They both shared apartment housing where multiple family lives. Okay. Let's see here. Living areas.
She compared Pyhrrus to Putin, and then she compared Stalin to Putin, or Putin to Stalin.
Okay, here it is. So during Putin's growing up following World War II, and then we know Stalin was the ground force violence leader of the ground force in these early days of the Russian Revolution. So ground force of violence. Okay, I think I remember now. So Stalin used a ground force of violence at the beginning of the revolution. Okay, so let's keep that in mind as we move forward. And then if they notice here, she says if people did not agree with him, whole villages were wiped out in a brutal fashion, violent military response, ground force. Now, Putin was also part of the ground force in East Germany, but here it is, his method was a bit different. Can anybody tell me, she's asking the question, Brody, not me, but I'm asking it for her. Can anybody tell me what Putin specialized in the KGB? What was his role and what was his work?
This was more on espionage, and I think you said it earlier,
Exactly.
digging up dirt on people and using it.
He was the KGB. And what is the KGB? Secret police, right?
Right.
The secret police and he worked in the counterintelligence department. Counterintelligence. Okay, so keep that in mind. Stalin was, let's see here, military ground force power. Power of the military ground force. Okay, and then no, that was Stalin. I'm sorry. Stalin was military ground force violence. Okay, and then Putin was in counterintelligence espionage, getting to know state secrets, sneaking across your own country. Conducting interviews, defectors, active measures, tackling disinformation, identifying discord, understanding who the enemy is, what your enemy is. what kind of violence are you going up against? Because we live in an age where battles are not necessarily fought as they were before with just force. Now we have information, the information age. So I think that's really the point she is trying to highlight here, is that Stalin at the beginning, his mode of warfare, or the way he responded, was with brute force, ground force, military ground force. Okay.
Just to give you a quick time check, we should probably wrap up within about 5 minutes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then Putin's mode of warfare was not were more essentially identifying measures of disinformation, essentially from his counterintelligence background. Okay, so did everyone understand that? They both had different modes of warfare. They are both, they both have the same characteristic of force, but one's force looks different than the other, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. So now as we close, let's wrap it up by focusing on this characteristic. And I think this is really the last. I think we've pretty much covered it all. I'm surprised that we've actually gone through all the characteristics, but this final characteristic is basically how in both of these histories, when these two leaders were chosen by the previous leader, both of those leaders realized that they had made a mistake in choosing this leader, but it's too late. I think, for me, I think that's a significant characteristic there.
Yeah, because it was Lenin that chose Stalin, right? And then it was Yeltsin that chose Putin. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that. But then we could take that also back in the Pyrrhic Wars too. And
Right.
that's what she's going to do in the next couple of slides here. So as we wrap it up, I think that's significant. The Lord made sure that these leaders had the same sentiment about the leader that they elected, this leader that came up too fast, too quickly, with very little background. Pyhrrus was obviously 17 when he took place, and how he co-ruled, and
Inexperienced, yeah.
inexperience, and then Putin also inexperienced, and he also co-ruled, and they felt that they made a bad decision. So again, all of these characteristics are the same. So it's too the characteristic, the information is too vast, for people not to see it. I mean, this is a wealth of information, of characteristics that enable us to see that Putin is the last president of Russia, and that he is a perfect representation of Pyhrrus and that history. All the leaders before Pyhrrus are identical. The characteristics as we've seen and learned, are all, I mean, they're so close, they're identical. I mean, think about the coup, right? We went over that. There was a coup, they both come back, but they were weakened. And the people revolted against them, right? There was a revolution. And then to wrap this up, that revolution was attributed to the color red. Now, I never would have imagined that color red could have such a wealth of information behind it. And what we gleaned from that is that red is associated with revolution, with anarchy, with communism, you know, the spirit of the dragon, you know, this anarchy, revolution, and we derived all of that from Pyhrrus and that history, the red in politics, right? Remember, we read all of those articles from Wikipedia about what it means, what red means in politics, and how the color red was adopted by Russia, and Russia is called the Red Russians, Red Russia, or the Red Coats. And remember, the solid red flag, not a stripe of red, that's different. We're saying a solid red flag is an illustration of this revolutionary ideology, this red in politics, right? Red, you know, so that, you know, to sum it up, that is the characteristics that we've put together here, which can all be derived from Acts 27, the number 273, and bringing it back to Putin and how he is the last president of Russia. So thank you everyone for being here and for listening and for bearing with me in my way of expressing myself and teaching. So this has been I think my first presentation in several years. So I appreciate it. So
Glad
Well,
you
I
did it.
thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Very informative. I appreciate it, Victor.
my pleasure. Thank you for being here. It was my pleasure.
Do,
It was our
Great study. Thank you,
privilege.
Victor.
Yes, thank you, Victor. A privilege.
Yes, thank you very much, Victor. Absolutely. Very nice hearing from you again. Very good.
Can we get, I hate to do this, we gotta take a break because we gotta start at 11. If we could get someone, Victor, if you want to close in prayer, or I'll choose somebody to close in prayer.
Well, you can choose someone. I prayed at the beginning, right? So
Donna, would you like to close in prayer? And thank you, Victor. And there's a few people that are asking for a part 2, so just keep that in mind.
okay.
And possibly your notes? Could we get your presentation, your notes?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I have the whole PowerPoint presentation. I will email it to Elaine, and then she can send it out in a mass text or in a PDF style.
Great, thank you so much, Victor.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Very
Okay.
good.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you, everyone. My pleasure. And happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath, everybody. Okay, let's go ahead and close in prayer. Loving God, righteous and true, thank you for your goodness and mercy upon your people. We thank you for this informative study that Victor explained to us very clearly, and we appreciate the review. It's been a while since we've reviewed this study, and it was so interesting. We also appreciate all the work he put into it and the new revelations that came about. It's also a blessing just to hear his voice. We thank you, Lord, for this blessed Sabbath day and this precious time of fellowship. And we also look forward to the next study with Kathy McGraw. We pray these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.